So the CFO role, as we know, is really an important role in every company. But it's changed, right? I mean, it used to be more of a compliance type of role where people just wanted to make sure that everything ticked and tied, and you were going to keep the CEO out of jail. It was more of a compliance type of role. But really, the modern CFO role has changed from a compliance base to more of a communicator of value to the organization, leveraging the numbers to be able to tell a story in a positive and a credible way, right? So it's really important that the CFO is able to communicate effectively across internal and external constituents. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The interesting thing that as I was preparing for this, was looking at what the average tenure of a CFO is. And that kind of varies, and this information is a little bit dated. It actually shrunk a little bit at the back end of the pandemic, just given all the instability that was out there. But if you look at this from the period of 2015 to 2020, if you started in 2015, there was less than 50% of those folks still in their roles 5 years later. And what I thought was interesting is just 2 years in, almost 20% had moved on, right? So if you look at the average tenure, and it varies, right? The bottom number, 3.5 years, that was more of a current a current statistic that kind of factors in some of what was going on in the pandemic. Before this, the S&P 500 was somewhere between 4 and 5 years for average tenure. So I thought it was very interesting stat, and there's a lot of reasons for why that is, right? It's not that necessarily CFOs don't work out, but why is it that CFOs move on, right? Well, there's the obvious one, especially if you're in the tech industry or one of those industries that's constantly evolving and ultimately consolidating. M&A definitely impacts tenure, right? One company buys the other one, one of them's going to be out of a job. Relocation is another opportunity to move on. So one of my companies actually relocated out of San Jose, California, which is, as you know, a very high-cost area, to Colorado Springs. And in that process, at the end of that, they invited certain people to move on. They asked me to move on. I was a controller at the time. My wife, with 3 small kids at home, with most of her family support in San Jose, vetoed that. So that's certainly an opportunity to move on there. Interpersonal conflicts, I think that kind of goes without saying. I kind of liken it to dating, right? When you're interviewing for the CFO role, everyone's kind of putting their best face forward. It's kind of like a speed dating sort of situation. It's when you get into the trenches and something happens, how do people sort of respond to that? And if you respond in different ways, that's just not going to last long term from a personality standpoint. There obviously, as you know, economic factors, take that into account. Layoffs, not so much for you as an individual, but if layoffs impact some of your key team members, and you're unable to actually feel like you have enough tools in your tool shed to effectively get your job done, that might cause you to reconsider your role there. And then lack of voice. A lot of times you'll go into an organization and they've got a set type of people that are sort of the alphas there. And this type of role, you have to have a voice. You have to figure out a way to create the voice. And that can happen, that should happen organically. You have to be you, right? In order to be successful and to be comfortable being successful, you have to be you. And if your voice doesn't match the organization that you're with, that's going to probably cause you to look around. Or, the board or the CEO will want to go in a different direction.